this is AQA Psychology. This is the topic of gender, and we're looking in this video at the influence of media on gender roles. Now, the media tells us what to expect from men and women. When we watch a video or a film or watch TV or play a video game, we view what men and women are doing, and that gives us the information that we need about gender roles. And then via social learning, we learn to imitate those particular gender roles. So if you think back to our social learning topic, we go through all those same processes. We observe, first of all, we pay attention. If someone is reinforced for acting in a particular way or punished for acting in a particular way, then vicarious reinforcement takes place. If we see someone being rewarded for acting in a gender appropriate way, we're more likely to imitate them, depending on if they're the same sex as us or not. And so all of those same processes take place. The media, as you're probably aware, shows very rigid gender stereotypes, that men are in charge, dominant, aggressive, while females are damsels in distress and nurturing. There's quite a nice example in your booklet of that, which is the Disney princesses, who are often damsels in distress that need rescuing by strong, handsome princes. And do have a look at that little picture if you have a chance. But think back to your own experience as well. I'm sure you can think of many different examples of those particular gender roles in the media. Research has been done into the effect of TV on gender roles. So this was a really nice study which took place in British Columbia. Actually, there was a small town that, because of the mountains around it, it couldn't receive TV, and it was about to receive TV in about 1980. And Williams went there and did some research before TV was introduced about various different things, including gender roles, and then went back after TV had been present for a couple of years and conducted the same research to see how TV had affected gender roles and gender attitudes and gender stereotype behaviour and so on. And these were actually named, she called these three towns that she looked at: No-Tel, Unitel and Multitel. No-Tel is the town that she was really interested in, which didn't have any TV before the experiment. Unitel was a town that just had one channel, and Multitel was a town that had lots of channels. They had, she'd picked these other two towns because they were very similar to the town in terms of location and population and size and so on. They were very similar towns, so that she could compare. First of all, before the TV was introduced, she could compare No-Tel to Multitel and see if there was a difference in gender role attitudes and so on before, and then she could compare the difference in No-Tel from before and after TV was introduced. And what she found, this is what she looked at: the behaviour and the attitudes of children in those towns. She looked at sex stereotyped attitudes and beliefs and gender stereotypical behaviour, and found that in No-Tel particularly there was a vast increase in both these types of behaviour from before TV was introduced to after TV was introduced, that children were showing much more gender stereotypical behaviour. They were showing sex stereotyped attitudes and beliefs much more than before TV was introduced in the town. And that's looking at both at the same children after the introduction of TV and also children of a similar age as well, different children too. That's a really great experiment in a number of ways. So because it's a natural experiment, it's quite a rare situation where TV is introduced somewhere where it hasn't been before, and it really shows us the effects of TV on gender in the real world. So it's a great experiment in a number of ways. It's got really good controls in it. On the other hand, they didn't or couldn't record how much TV was being watched or what kinds of shows people were watching, which might make a really big difference if someone's watching just documentaries compared to if they're watching cartoons. That might really affect how much their gender attitudes are affected by that. And equally, it's quite an old study, 1985, so it's lacking temporal validity, but you know, they're exploiting a situation that is very rare and very unusual. And that's why we don't have a more recent one, because I suspect most places now have TV, apart from very remote places. Okay, what else does research show? Content analysis we've got a number of studies here which use content analysis. I've just put a quick reminder up here what that is for those of you who've forgotten. A method that's used to analyse qualitative data. So that might involve a number of things actually: news, books, articles, films, anything that's words basically, films, TV shows, any number of different things. Often that means you use coding units of some kind and transform it into quantitative data. The number of times someone uses negative terms to describe one gender or positive terms to describe another, that sort of thing. Okay, so we've got 3 different pieces of content analysis here. This first one, Huston and Wright, looked at men in US TV programs. And they found that men outnumber females, they have more dominant roles, better jobs, and show better problem solving. So that's a study that was done in 1998 looking at the US TV programs. Then we have another one, Signorelli, where they looked at children's cartoons. And they found that women were depicted as emotional, romantic, and domestic, while men were shown to be intelligent, technical, and aggressive. These are obviously generalisations. Clearly Homer Simpson is not depicted as intelligent, but this is looking at a number of different children's cartoons. Right, this last one then was looking at video games, Mu and Peng, where they looked at women characters, and they found that actually female characters in video games were often sexualized. If you think about Lara Croft sort of character, they aren't lead characters often in video games. They're more like helpers or damsels in distress, which is communicating something about the female gender to the people that play the game. Okay, so while these are 3 really good pieces of research that show gender stereotypes being perpetuated through 3 different forms of media, we need to just be careful using these to make the conclusion that media really causes and affects and influences gender stereotypes, because these studies don't actually look at the influence on the viewer. They're just looking at the TV show or the video game or whatever, and then they're making the assumption that because the show has gender stereotypes in, that means we will develop gender stereotypes. And that's quite a big assumption, because we could be watching these things thinking, oh, that's so stereotyped, that's so silly, or just even with an unconscious awareness that it's a stereotype and that we don't have to do exactly that. So it's a really big assumption to make on the part of the research. It doesn't necessarily show cause and effect. Okay, real life applications then from these pieces of research and others. So we can reduce, because the media can produce gender stereotyping, the flip side of it is that we can reduce stereotyping by showing children adverts with women in non-traditional roles. And Pingree found that they could do that it did reduce stereotyping. And there's a range of different implications that come from that, different ways that we could reduce negative gender stereotyping through the media, which is a positive thing. On the other hand, Pingree also found that pre-adolescent boys had a kind of what they called like a backlash effect, where they saw people doing non-traditional roles, gender roles, and that actually made them be more traditional. So it suggests that there were other things involved, other influences and factors, cognitive factors and so on, motivation, various different things. Age may affect whether the media can influence our gender role stereotypes or not. Okay, more criticisms of this area. Actually, a lot of gender development does happen before the age of 4, or certainly some of it does at least, when there's very little media influence. Children don't watch much TV, cartoons and so on before the age of 4. It tends to be a lot more after that age. So actually the effect of the media is relatively small in that age group. You could argue that the effect of the family and the family environment would have a much larger impact on those particular that particular age range where gender development is happening. So that suggests that perhaps the influence of the media is larger than has been suggested, and that perhaps it's more, rather than it being a thing of the media creating gender influence, it might be more that in older children it's reinforcing and cementing existing beliefs that they have, or if you think back to our cognitive topic, where it's actually helping them to become more subtle in their reasoning, and improving and becoming more flexible in their understanding of gender. Okay, so the media theory also views the child as a passive recipient. Again, if you think back to our cognitive topic, we talked quite a lot about the fact that children are more active in their learning, that they're choosing information, they're choosing different things to interact with, and that really depends on where they're at with their gender schema and so on. So actually the child is not a passive recipient of information. They interact with their world, they select different things, they try them out, they try out different behaviours to see what the reaction is and so on. So actually that's quite a big criticism of this topic, because it's viewing the child as very passive.